All right, now to the highlight why you're all here this evening. We are very honored and pleased to welcome you this evening and to our guest speaker, Martha Jordan. And we welcome her back because she was also a speaker for us back in 2007, thereabouts. Martha holds a degree in wildlife science from Oregon State University, and she has worked with terrestrial and marine environments throughout Washington and parts of Alaska. In the late 1970s, her attention to the Skagit Valley was drawn beyond snow geese to include a group of trumpeter swans in the same area. By expanding her survey efforts and careful work, by 1984, she was able to contribute key information on the status of trumpeter swans in Washington state. Martha wrote the state's first trumpeter swan management plan and is still active in both field work and education related to both trumpeter and tundra swans throughout the region. She is founder and executive director of Northwest Swan Conservation Association, and that's a regional nonprofit. There is no unassigned time for Martha. She is busy. In the very recent past, she has given presentations to Skagit Audubon, the Padilla Bay Center, and Adopt-A-Stream, to name just a few. And less than 2 weeks ago, she orchestrated the midwinter swan census. As a sign of her unflagging devotion to waterfowl of all types and their habitats, Martha has recently been named a member of the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife's waterfowl section. We are very fortunate to have Martha Jordan with us here tonight, communicating her insights into Washington's white birds of winter and the challenges they face in migration and on their wintering grounds. With that, turn the evening over to you, Martha, and we look forward to hearing what you have to share with us. Take it away.
Okay, so I'm gonna screen share.
Yes, ma'am.
There we go.
Perfect.
And I'm going to make this go away. Beep.
Bravo.
Go.
Perfect.
And I would like this to go somewhere else, but I don't know how low I can make it go. Guess that's it. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the swans and the snow geese in Washington and give you some facts and things. So there's a lot of things that I have in a swan only program or a snow goose only program that won't be here. But somebody did ask me about what was the cause of the die-off, and the answer is lead ingestion from old lead shot and new lead shot, mostly old lead shot. And we just lost another trumpeter to fishing sinkers out on the Olympic Peninsula, as well as locally here. So if you choose to fish and you choose to hunt, make sure you're lead free. So sporting lead free. So with that, I'm going to start the program, I think. So the swans in North America, who are they? We have trumpeter, tundra, and the ever-present introduced mute swan. I'll just very briefly say that the mute swan in much of North America is being controlled by many states. The East Coast has a terrible problem with them because right now they're wiping out part of an endangered tern colony. So they really are a deleterious species, which is what they are in the state of Washington by state law. They're not covered under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. Yes, they do breed over the border in British Columbia, but even they are doing some control measures now because the mute swan, as beautiful as it is, non-native, and it will kill our native ducks, geese, and attempt to, it has hybridized with some of our swans as well. The tundra swan is the smallest of the swan species we have here. Tundra, the whistling form, versus tundra, the Buick form, which is the Eastern Hemisphere. But they breed in the Arctic and in the high Arctic, and I'll talk to you about that in a moment. They weigh about 15 to 20 pounds. They have a wingspan of about 6 feet. The trumpeter swans are the largest waterfowl in the world. The mute swan is a close second, but not quite as big. Our trumpeter swans breed in the Arctic areas in Alaska. They weigh about 25 to nearly 40 pounds, some of the really big males, wingspan of 7 to 9 feet. And they are formidable during the breeding season. And then, of course, you have the snow goose, which we'll talk about. They're about 6 pounds and they have a wingspan of about 3 feet. So swans in the Alaska distribution. So we're going to talk more about that in the sense that our trumpeter swans nest in the interior of Alaska, and our tundra swans, all of them across the Pacific coast population, nest along the coastal areas of Alaska. So we'll talk about that in a moment. Most of our swans are coming out of the base of the Aleutians, Salmon Bay area, Cold Bay area. The rest of these tundra swans, I'll show you in a moment where they actually go. Our trumpeter swans nest not only in the interior of Alaska in these areas, but they also nest a little bit into western British Columbia. So everything west of the Yukon River going up through Whitehorse is the Pacific population of trumpeter swans, and everything east of the Yukon River up in that zone is the Rocky Mountain population of trumpeter swans, which I'll talk to you about in a moment. So here in Washington, we have, two sides of the Cascades. They are right down the middle of our state. Trumpeter swans are divided in population, the Pacific Coast population, Rocky Mountain population, but the tundra swans are throughout the state. There's just one group of those birds. So we just completed the midwinter swan survey, and some people have been writing me and observing very astutely that there's not as many juveniles this year, especially in trumpeters, and that there just doesn't seem to be as many swans. They are correct. Whatcom, Skagit, Snohomish, and King counties had a total swan count of 10,619. As you can see, in 2023, we had 16,389. Now, about 850 of those were in the Sumas Prairie of Canada. And of those, about 12,500 were trumpeters and about 450 of them were tundra. We have less tundra swans every single year, it seems like. We used to have more tundra swans than trumpeter, then it became more trumpeter than tundra. And now throughout Western Washington, it's about 85% trumpeter swan versus tundra swan in the midwinter counts. Total number of tundra swans in these 4 county areas is just about 1,100 birds. The key here is that the juveniles are 8.8%, and that's down from a norm of 15 to 18%. No one has really explained why this is happening other than it appears weather may be a major factor, but we're just not sure. So that's down almost 5,000 swans from last year. And again, fewer trumpeters than tundras. And yes, we are aware of that. And we don't totally have an explanation. So I'm going to talk about tundra swans, the other white bird, as I call it. And they have a wide variation, not only in the yellow on the lore, here's an example of it, but this tundra swan here on the left has red line on the mandible. Excuse me. And about 15% of tundra swans have a red line on the mandible. So it's not a key characteristic, I assure you. And you can see the variation in size with these birds. So here's some juvenile tundras just starting to get their yellow lore and one of the parents. So this gives you kind of an idea of the population of our trumpeter swans in the yellow and our tundra swans, the breeding population numbers at each of these sites. And you'll notice that the eastern tundra swans are along north of the North Slope, north of the Brooks Range. So these 15,000 tundra swans, they do something different because they're not our birds. So tundra swan migration through satellite transmitter. You can see the North Slope of Alaska here in the fall migration, and again in the spring migration. All of these birds go to the East Coast. Now, tundra swans do nest across the whole Arctic, but the North Slope of Alaska birds are 100% East Coast birds. Occasionally we get a bird here, but not mostly. Then you notice that here in the Nome area, and here's the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, which I spent 2 summers on working with the Fish and Wildlife Service, herding geese with my border collie for banding species in trouble. And all of these birds fly way over into the Alberta zone, and then they flip back and they go through the Great Salt Lake, through Nevada, and they go into Northern California and all the various habitats there, including Chico. And then at the base here, you see the tundra swans there kind of do a lesser loop, and they mostly go to California. Some of them are going to come into our area, but most of our tundra swans come all across, they come straight across the Gulf of California, and no, they don't stop, and they come into our zone. So we're not part of these tundra swans at all. And you can see that from this kind of thingy here. And they take about the same route back. In Washington, some really interesting things with tundra swans have cropped up because of satellite transmitter data. And one of them is the tundra swans have kind of a dual migration route here. So the green dots are where we have seen tundra swans typically coming through on eastern side. Now on the west side, again, all of our tundra swans are Pacific Coast population. They winter here with this kind of orangey area, but they come down from the north by the green, and they all go down into, a lot of them, most of them go down into the Columbia and through Ridgefield and all of that. And then they stay there. And I'm going to move this thing up, move over somewhere. I wish I knew how to make it smaller. And you can see that here they are. And then when they go back north, some of them go back up through the Puget Sound, but most of them head east. And then they split here just south of Spokane, and they go off to the Alberta zone and then flip back to Alaska, or they come up through here and Kalispell Lake. And I want to say that Kalispell Lake in late March is an amazing place to see the migration of tundras. And in that tundra flock over the last several years, we have now probably amassed more like 300 to 400 trumpeter swans. Where are they coming from, those trumpeters? Well, I'd tell you if I knew. We don't know. They're coming from somewhere and they're spending time in the tundra flocks, but where? We don't know. So that's the tundra swan east-west connection. And in Alaska, the tundra swans nest out on the Yukon Delta, which is where they molt typically. They'll make a nest in the grass along some lake and pond, because there's a bazillion of them out there. And they lay eggs, and both parents can tend to the young, and sometimes the male will incubate. So here they are, 30 days later, there's a hatch, and they rear them out there, and it's pretty spectacular to watch them romping around out there. Just for size comparison, here's an actual photo, not photoshopped, of shovelers flying with some tundra swans. And notice how light gray these birds are and how the yellow is starting to come in on their bills. It's white in the beginning, and then it will turn yellow. So even on our Hooper swans and our Buick swans, the area that will turn yellow will be white when they're young. So our trumpeter swans are all white with black legs at about 4 years of age. Here they are in their dark sooty gray, juvenile, mottled orange, pinkish, black mottling. Interestingly enough, the Rocky Mountain population of trumpeters, the juveniles, have a more pinkish leg than our birds in the Pacific Coast population. I don't know why, but they do. So something interesting. So here are the 3 populations of trumpeter swans. And let me be really clear about this. So we have the Pacific Coast population, which breeds in Alaska and in Western BC, you know, and then up into the Yukon and then here. And it winters along the Pacific Coast, but does not typically go to California. So Oregon, Washington, and Western BC. We have the Rocky Mountain population, which is the one that you probably heard about that only had 99 left. And here we have a population here in the tri-state area, Yellowstone, the greater Yellowstone, still a bit in trouble. The Alberta birds, which are all of these birds here, they're doing fine. They're doing really well. So, and this is a restoration flock in Oregon down at Summer Lake. And this is where trumpeters are now being breeding in Turnbull, just 1 pair, maybe 2 at the most. But I will say that we don't have to do any restoration in Eastern Washington. The birds are coming back really strong. We think about 60 birds overwintering at Sinalekan, and there's other sightings all over Eastern Washington of birds staying the winter. The interior population, which is down here, this is a completely human restored population. They do not migrate for the most part. They stay right kind of around where they are. Some of them might migrate a few states away. This whole interior population that you hear about through the Trumpeter Swan Society and others is managed completely and totally different than our wild populations. A lot of what you know about swans that are in here does not translate well when you come into these wild populations. So it's kind of interesting. So here is our Washington trumpeter swans. So all of you birders get out there and help us determine where they all are in Eastern Washington. And there are some places that are cool in Western Washington. So right down the Cascade Range, the PCP, with the yellow areas where we have seen trumpeters consistently throughout the years. And on the other side, the Rocky Mountain population, which again breeds interior in British Columbia and up into Alberta, and where we have seen these birds over the years. Now, yes, there's going to be more sightings in this, and there certainly are, but this is where we see most of it. And these little arrows here, that's kind of cool. We know for a fact that trumpeter swans are doing something really interesting. So trumpeter swan breeding is, one of them is Minto Flats, way east of Fairbanks, about 40 miles, and you can't drive to Minto Flats. There's no roads out there, but it's thousands of square miles of just forest and wetland, and it's one of the prime breeding grounds for trumpeter swans in the PCP. It's a great place to take an airplane and have some fun days banding swans. And here are trumpeter swan nests. They nest on muskrat houses or on islands. These are all airboat tracks that are creating problems now for swans up in Alaska, where recreation is out competing birds for their habitat, even in remote areas. So you have trumpeter swan eggs weigh about 1 pound. They have a 35-day incubation, and then they hatch out, and they have a 1 pound egg and lay an egg every other day. Little guy down here has his egg tooth, and he has his foot on top of his head. And they are born kind of a light gray with salmon pink bill and feet. And the parents are very, very careful with them, and they take them out in these big, huge marsh areas of Minto Flats and around in other areas where they breed. And like all waterfowl, they're they're precocial, sorry. And the parents help to roil up food and the kids feed themselves. And then they fly at 102 days. Tundra swans fly at 90 days. So when you do the math, it is the number of ice-free days that determines how far north a particular bird can nest. Trumpeter swans take 102 days to fly, 33, 35 days of incubation, and then they have another 2 weeks of the nesting season. They have 2 weeks less to get their brood off the ground before freeze up than a tundra swan. And that's why trumpeter swans do not go any further north nesting than they do. Oops. So let's go down to the Skagit Valley habitats. Why are the swans and the geese here? And other waterfowl. Waterfowl friendly farming, dairy farms, corn and silage grass are the big ones. The grass crop that you see out there, if it's not winter wheat, it could be, but it's also grown for silage for dairy cows. And the swans love it, and the geese love it as well. Potatoes are huge in the Skagit Valley, and this year they're even more huge because the potato industry, the farming community, grew too many potatoes this year. So they either left them in the ground, or you see them dumped out on the fields in rows. You'll see white potatoes and red potatoes mostly. And that's because they grew too many potatoes and there wasn't enough market, and the waterfowl are reaping the benefits. Pumpkins and other crops the birds find tasty in the fields. And then the night roosts are nearby. And night roosts are really important for the swans. So if you have fields that are near a water body like Johnson Bay Slough or the bay, or there's little lakes around in the valley, that's where the birds are going to be. Dairy farms. Dairy farms, 85% of our trumpeter swan population in Western Washington is dairy farm dependent, and dairy farms are going away at a rapid rate. Started with environmental regulations a number of years ago. Market forces have also come in, but we continue. But the salmon regulation and the vilification of dairy farms by some really had an impact. And it has an impact on the carrying capacity of our ducks, swans, and geese. So here's a dairy farm down here, and it has not only corn, but it also has the pasture. Corn, they turn the waste corn that the farmer post-harvest. It is a huge resource for these birds. Potatoes, another big one. And it's really fun to watch them digging potatoes because they get really, really muddy. And this year it's remarkable what you can see up in the Skagit with the mud and these birds. There are times when it's hard to tell if it's a trumpeter or a tundra because they're completely covered in mud. Natural wetlands are really important, and we have some up in the Skagit, but throughout Western Washington, especially along Hood Canal and the outer coast, natural wetlands is where they are. However, it cannot support anything close to what the agricultural lands do. In fact, our swans and snow geese are ag dependent at this time to maintain the populations that we prefer. And then for those of you who saw those little arrows that crossed over the Cascades, for years, I have believed that there has been an exchange of trumpeter swans from the east side to the west side, and likely going west to east. And maybe about 15 years ago, we did watch a group of swans coming through the SR-20 pass from the east and landing at Diablo and Ross Lake. We also found a dead trumpeter there with a collar on it from eastern Oregon. And yet that wasn't proof enough that this was really happening. Then I found a swan dead. Well, we've all seen swans. Well, many of you have seen swans in Cle Elum during the summer or during the fall and even the winter. But nobody's seen them coming through the pass on I-90 until 2 years ago. A photographer and a hunter guy was driving and he hit the Hyack area and 9 trumpeter swans flew over I-90. So he got out and he took pictures of them. And I have to say, seeing trumpeter swans flying with ski lifts in the background in Washington State is just wrong. But there they were. And what are they doing? They're coming into the lower Snoqualmie Valley. They may be going down to the Enumclaw area because we have some sightings of them taking a left turn after they get through the pass there around North Bend. And then we also see them coming into Carnation. And I did pick up a leucistic trumpeter swan at Carnation that was dead. It's an all-white bird. And leucism is something that's in the Rocky Mountain population. So in any event, if you happen to see swans coming through the pass and you happen to have a camera, please send us the photos. And then you never know what you will find. Here we have some birds this year where we've got 4 what we call bent neck swans. These are bent necks in the Skagit. It's a treasure hunt if you can find all 4. I've seen them at least 3 times where I've had 4 birds in one day. I don't know where they are right now, but certainly somewhere around north of District Line Road and somewhere down by Conway, and one was out on the flats. So they seem to survive because this is an adult, and this is a tundra, and these are juveniles. The vertebrae is in fact deformed. This is not an injury. But here's the bottom 2 are ones that last year I was sent the photograph on the right of this juvenile trumpeter swan with a very deformed looking neck. And I'm realizing this is in the Skagit Valley, right? So that bird had to come down looking like this, and the fact that he made it. This year we saw this bird on the right, on the left, excuse me. And I'm looking at this bird and I'm looking at the one on the right, and I'm thinking, well, if he was able to get his neck a little more outstretched, that deformity at the base of the neck is very similar to the juvenile. And that curve is identical to this curve over here. So it's very possible that the bird survived another year, and here it is as a 1-year-old swan. So if you happen to see bent neck swans and you happen to get some photos, please share them. This is the most bent necks we've ever seen. Why are we having such deformities? I don't know, but they're there and they're out there. The other thing that you're going to find up in the Skagit at this time of year, this year, a grad student, Yvonne Ramon, is putting on satellite transmitters. She's got 19 on so far. They're very lightweight, they're solar powered, and they ping every 15 minutes so we can find where all the swans are. They also have leg bands on. The white collars are very hard to see, although you might be able to see the dark solar panel, but they're out there. And we're learning amazing things about the movement of these swans in the valley this year. And when the birds made a major shift in their movements in the last 5 days, one of the collared birds that was banded in the Skagit went to Bellingham area, and the other one came down to Monroe, down by Crescent Lake at the Honor Farm. And I actually found the girl yesterday. They only banded adult females, and she had a mate with a single cygnet. That was kind of fun. Treasure hunt. So the swans are here, and we also have snow geese, the other white bird. And of course, they are small. They have black wingtips, pink bills and feet. So the lesser snow goose is what we have. And we have 100% basically Wrangel Island birds. They now have enough satellite transmitters on these birds. They have the same satellite transmitter technology as the swans, just a smaller size collar. And all of our birds are coming out of Wrangel Island. Western Arctic is, as you can see, goes spanning more of the Arctic in the west, but they come down in a different pattern, and we do not have Western Arctic snow geese in our area. They're mostly California, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, Nevada, Idaho, a little bit of Eastern Oregon, and some into Colorado. And the mid-continent population is completely different from ours, and it is managed 100% differently than ours. It's in the see, we have the Pacific Flyway, and then we have the I forget the name of the flyway, the completely different flyway that manages this population. And this is the population that has a tremendous amount of wintering grounds and is destroying the breeding grounds. We have the opposite problem. We have unlimited breeding and limited wintering. So the management of this population is very different, and you may have heard that they have a spring hunt. It's a conservation management plan that they do, where after general hunting season, sometime in late February, early March, you're allowed to unplug your shotgun and you can basically unlimited season on them for a couple of weeks. We don't have that here, and we're not going to be able to get that here. Not that we necessarily want it, but we do have an extended snow goose hunt and white bird only that will start this coming weekend and run for 10 days. The greater snow goose is only on the East Coast, and it breeds up in the Canadian Arctic. And so we just have these very different populations. So all of our geese in both Eastern and Western Washington, they breed on Wrangel Island. So the lesser snow goose has two color morphs: the white, black wingtips, orange legs, pinky orange, black grinning patch. The blue phase is blue, but has the black wing tips, and it has a white head. And you can see that the juvenile white phase is gray, and they have kind of a gray, black, pink bill, and they have black legs. Same for the juvenile blue morph, which is on the right, and they're all dark. They're really quite dark in the beginning of the season. They nest on Wrangel Island, which is north of Siberia and the Chukchi Sea. We'll talk about them in just a moment. Here's a satellite transmitter thing for snow, Ross's and the Thule white fret. Our snow geese nest up here in the high Arctic of Wrangel Island. And you can see the paths that they take going into California, but also coming down here into our area. The Thule white front is in yellow, and the other one is the greater white front is in the orange. So it nests out here on the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta area. I've banded a number of them, and then it comes down here. The Ross goose, which of course it's mostly going into California. We do get a few stragglers here once in a while. So our snow geese, Wrangel Island, Russia, Fraser-Skagit Delta, Canada, and the US, right up here in the red. And then the Sauvie Island, Chillipu area of Oregon and Washington, Boardman, Oregon, and Moses Lake. And then, of course, the big place is the Central Valley, California. So where do our birds come from? So here you have the Western Arctic birds, but you also have Wrangel Island birds. Some of them go to Alberta, and then they go down into Central California. And our birds, coming from Wrangell Island, same birds, come down through Alaska and they come down this way and into our area. So the status of snow geese right now, they were, of course, very much of concern back in the late 70s and the 80s when only 30,000 of them still existed. And a lot of effort was made to recover the population. Well, we've recovered it all right. Let me just say, so the 2023 fall migration is unknown going up to Wrangell due to no information from Russia because of the Ukrainian war. But the 2022 fall migration coming off Wrangell, so let me just say, returning to Wrangell Island in May of 2022 was 1 million snow geese. In the fall of 2022, 1.4 million snow geese came off the island. They had an increase of a huge number of birds. 0.4 million birds were hatched. The age ratio was somewhere between 40 and 56%, depending on the year. So it was huge. So a lot of juvenile snow geese were coming down. It's not quite like that this last year, but I don't have the stats for that because, again, nobody was either on Russia or the Russians were not communicating at all. So in the winter of 2024, they did a Skagit-Fraser winter count because we exchange birds between them on a daily basis, 109,000. Last year we had 138,000. This year, 109,000. So unlike in 2018, we had 109,993. Then we had 135,000. Then we went up to 138,000, and now we're down to 109,000 again. I'll talk about that in a minute. In 2015 and 16, there were about 20,000 snow geese in the Columbia Basin. Before that, it was probably looking at 500, maybe. And so this year, 165,000 snow geese in eastern Washington in a small kind of area. Oregon and Washington down by Sauvie Island has gone from 35,000 to about 38,000. And Oregon connects that count. So they're increasing in the Sauvie Island, Ridgefield National Wildlife Area and Chillipu Triangle. What will their total be for the years coming? We have no idea, but they are increasing down there. So the Fraser Skagit, which is us, here's the Skagit, here's the Fraser, and they fly between this 100 kilometers, sometimes on a daily basis. Sometimes there'll be more down here, or sometimes there'll be more up here. The problem that the Fraser River is having with the snow geese is they're eating out all the aquatic vegetation, whereas we have agriculture because the bay has already been pretty much compromised just for China and other things. So there is concern about all these snow geese and what Canada thinks of them versus what the US and what Russia thinks of it. So the reality is our population of snow geese is managed by the Snow Goose Management Plan, but it's between Russia, Canada, the US, and Mexico. The mid-continent population only has Canada and the US. So we have a much more complex way of having to manage birds because we have 4 countries involved. So the Sauvie Island, Chillipu, Ridgefield area is really cool. You can go down there and it's really nice. Ridgefield is here. Sauvie Island is here. Sturgeon Lake. Chillipu Wildlife Area is here. So a small number by comparison, but the winter population is really growing. And they do not have an extended white goose season down in this area. So Eastern Washington, how did the geese make this transition from not being on the east side to being in the east side in a very large way. And here's the Columbia National Wildlife Refuge. Here's Richland, Kennewick, and here's Oregon, Boardman, Oregon. So just keep, and here's, of course, Yakima here. So what happened? Well, regulations and other things forced some of the dairy farms to move to eastern Washington. And one of the big ones went to Boardman, Oregon. And there is now a 70,000 cow dairy in Boardman. But they also put in a huge cattle feedlot. And they started growing all these crop circles for crops. And they had a Cold Springs Lake and another lake. And all this is private land and nobody got to hunt it. So the snow geese kind of came up from Summer Lake, where they used to winter 250, 300,000 strong, and they abandoned that area and came into the Boardman area. And then it wasn't too much longer that they went across to discover more crop circles over here growing great crops. And then it wasn't too far when they went to these crop circles, and then more dairy farms were coming into the east side. And now this is what you have. Here is a map showing all the dairy farms. Now, it isn't 100% dairy that's causing this shift, but it's a big one. And here you can see this area here in pink is basically this area. You have Columbia National Wildlife Refuge, which was a big asset. Most of the birds were down in Boardman, Oregon, and kind of down through here in Richland and all that. But now, this year and last year, they have really moved up to the Moses Lake area, and now they're evenly distributed through the whole Moses Lake to Boardman, Oregon area. And if you go to the Othello Sandhill Crane Festival, you might see what I saw last year, which was 140,000 snow geese piling in one day into the reservoir, the Potholes Reservoir. It took them 2.5 hours to do it, but it was an endless stream of snow geese coming from wherever they were from the south. It's really spectacular. So snow geese on our landscape are creating crop damage, just like swans are for the farmers. Some of these farmers are losing anywhere from $30,000 to $100,000 worth of crop being eaten by these birds, and they do not get reimbursed for that. So that begats, how do we control the snow geese in the Skagit and now in the whole Eastern Washington zone, because they're now creating some pretty major damage issues for the farmers. So snow goose hunting is what they opted for. It's one of the management tools that can happen. So they also decided to do an extended snow goose hunt where the normal bag limit on the west side is 10 per day. And during the extended snow goose season, it's 20 per day. And it's a 10-day season. And you still have to follow all the rules. It's still 3 shells in your gun and all of that. But you're going to see that starting here on the 10th of February and going for 10 days. It is only in Goose Management Area 4, which is Whatcom, Skagit, and Snohomish County, west of I-5 in Snohomish County. They also close all of the wildlife areas to hunting to give the birds a refuge and a place to go. It was crafted with a lot of thought and effort. I gave a lot of input into the snow goose hunt so it wouldn't fall on festival days, and also about really protecting the swans and other birds so they could also have a safe place in the spring where they can get ready to make the migration. So the management actions in goose management, it's actually 4. Last season and the current one is 20 geese a day starting on Saturday. So if you see hunters out and about, snow goose sets out, it is legal. And sometimes you just never know what you're going to see. I was out doing a swan survey, all kinds of swans were coming in. It was down by Conway on the east side of the freeway, and then a lot of snow geese just started to come in, and it was thousands of snow geese coming in on top of the swans. And then all of a sudden the snow geese start to take off, and way up here in the sky on the upper one, you'll see an eagle. And then I realized as I was sitting in my vehicle, just like not that far from these birds, that they might just either hit my vehicle or poop all over it. But fortunately, they flared in time and they all took off, except that you notice what didn't take off, and that's the swans. The swans just didn't care. They stayed. But that said, the eagle was still flying and there were other eagles airborne, and I decided to drive around the corner, and this is what I found. About 30 feet from the road was a bunch of bald eagles on their kill, and they were having a fighting time. So habitat trends, farming, wetlands, and waterfowl, loss of waterfowl-friendly farming is really big. Market forces, both local and global, have caused the dairies to close or move, and a shift in crops farmed to shift to hazelnuts are a big one now in the Skagit, berries, increased regulations, salmon habitat restoration has been competing and conflicting for waterfowl habitat, and crop shifts to deter crop loss from the snow geese. So some farmers are planting non-waterfowl friendly farming just to avoid having damage from snow geese. So we do wintering habitat loss. You go from these dairy farms that you see at the top and the potato fields and the corn fields to the berry fields. Thousands of acres are now berries that used to be other waterfowl friendly farming, or it goes to nursery crops, nursery trees, shrubs. This is a big one. Goes to hothouses in Canada to grow tomatoes for the stores. And the one here on the lower side where this pond used to be, it's now your Kmart store in Mount Vernon. And then, of course, we have ecotourism, and it comes in all forms, whether you be an individual with your binoculars or spotting scope or out for a biking ride. This is after hunting season, I might add. Or you're in your car and you're all over the road and you're trespassing on private property, which I would highly suggest you not do. And camera people, all kinds of people, and the snow geese start to lose their fear of people. And sometimes they are all over the road. So you can stop on the road and, you can, using your car as a blind is the best idea that I can come up with. But again, snow geese are either going to come to you or you're going to go to them. And certainly after the extended snow goose hunt, they really lose their fear of people. And this happens all up and down the flyway as they make their way north. See them in Alaska, and they just came out on the road and they just were all over the place, and I was standing in them. I'm promoting birding with awareness, which is different than what some people might call. It's creating connections between user groups and waterfowl habitats. It's about respecting our shared spaces. Birders, hikers, sportsmen, women all share two things in common. They all rely on healthy natural lands, and they all must be good stewards of these shared spaces. So when you're birding, bird with respect for others that are using the site, whether they be a dog walker, a photographer, a hunter, photographer, whatever. And you never know what you're going to find. I found a sandhill crane among a bunch of swans one year. And pay attention to what's really happening on the grounds around you. And here is a case over in Squim where we have a organic farmer, Nash, and he plants organic carrots, table carrots. And in January, they harvest the carrots, just like these guys are doing, the people. And then about 200 feet away are swans eating those very same carrots, which are worth a huge amount of money in the open market. But Mr. Nash is content to let this happen. So just be aware, I have this poster up in different places that I visit. But the 4 table legs for a sustainable ecosystem, economically and environmentally, you've got to have your wildlife, got to have your hunters and conservation-minded people, got to have your agriculture, and you've got to have your ecotourism, which is bird watchers and other visitors of all kinds. And that is what will sustain the Skagit. You've got to get that waterfowl-friendly farming under control. So for those of you who haven't been up to the Skagit or don't know, there's been a problem with birders trespassing on private lands. And many of the property owners and farmers are really not happy. So please be respectful of private property. There's not a lot of public land up there. It's all private farmland for the most part. But if you want to know more, tap into the website that has been created by this group called Be Birdwise. It's bebirdwise.org, promoting responsible behavior while viewing migratory birds on the agricultural landscape. It's a pretty good website, and I highly recommend it. So avian influenza is out there this year. It hit the Cackler Canada geese and the Caspian terns the hardest, although some swans have died, some geese have died, but last season the snow geese were hit really hard. We recommend that you do not touch any dead bird that you find that's a waterfowl of any kind. Report them immediately, and I repeat, do not touch them. If they have AI, you can transfer it, you can spread it, and you can even get it. It's rare, but it has happened. But you certainly don't want to pick up these birds, whether they're sick or dead. Just leave them and call the Swan hotline, which I'll show you that number in a moment because the number is brand new. You can report them online at the website that I have, or you can just type in WDFW avian influenza, and it will take you right to their website. Or if you want to, the Swan hotline. We partner with Power a lot because things happen with the birds with hitting the lines, whether they be marked or not. Mel Walters is with Puget Sound Energy, has been putting up all these fireflies all over the place, and curlicues as well. And the reduction has been around 90-something% reduction in power line strikes. Oops. And of course, lead poisoning. It's now more challenging to determine the cause of death due to avian influenza because we can't do any necropsies. But lead poisoning is still out there. I just picked up a bird the other day off of Lake Ty. There were 2 swans out there, both died of lead poisoning. And we're still picking it up in the Skagit and throughout the Snoqualmie Valley. So fish lead-free and get the lead out. So if you're going out to fish, those split shot, change them out and encourage other people to do so. Lake Tapps is covered in fishing sinkers, so you can see the fishing sinkers. 1 split shot, dead animal. And of course, loons ingest the whole thing for the most part. So the new Swan hotline number is 360-466-0515. What we want to prevent is eagles and other scavengers from eating any lead shot or any fishing sinkers that may be in the body of the birds that they're scavenging. So we want to prevent secondary poisoning, which is why I urge you, if you see a dead bird or a sick bird, please give the hotline a call. And if it's in Snohomish County or basically South Snohomish and King, I'm the one that'll get the call from the department to go pick it up. So if we all come together, we all gather around and we have good conversation, we can solve a lot of these problems and further the art of birding and having a good time and keep the skies filled with our white birds of winter. So any questions?
Brava. Yes, folks, your questions. Let's see. If I go to the top,
I'm gonna
there
stop.
was one question.
I'm gonna stop screen share if that's okay.
Okay,
Or if people want me
there
to, I can
was.
still share screen and leave up my cute little signet. And
Oh,
you
we'd rather
notice,
look at you.
you notice that signet, the ears on signets have little tufts of down that come out. I thought that was so cool.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure we picked that up.
Let me show you this one. Look at here on the side of the head.
Oh,
Those are where the ears are. And it's not obvious when you look at a signet. It's just not. And it took a photographer to actually capture that. This is one of the birds that I raised in my backyard. It eventually went to Iowa. So, questions?
excellent. If there are any people that have questions they would like to ask, they're very welcome to unmute and pipe up. I'm going to see if I can find a slide out of the wonderful slides that you saved or that I pilfered. Let's see, where is it? Pilfered. Oh dear, I'm in the wrong place. Sorry.
Well, here, let me put up something else. We can have more pictures.
When you have salvaged young birds and we're raising them, I think I saw that you don't want them to imprint, so you have a sort of a swan decoy. Is that right?
Yes, and there is a picture that you guys have of a swan decoy. We used the swan decoys originally when we restored Hines Marsh down on the Long Beach Peninsula. Yes, the marsh is there because I and many others had an opportunity and we seized the day. But I have to say that criminal behavior is a heck of a fundraiser, but not recommended, as the attorney said. So we used those to put out on the marsh to bring the swans back, and within 3 days, swans were back at the marsh. And then I started using them to rear the cygnets that I was getting every summer from Northwest Trek. And then I would raise them up for maybe a week or 10 days or so, and then they would send them to Iowa. It was quite, I did that for 20 some years until the states no longer wanted to take any cygnets. They had restored the flocks and they're doing fine without any additional birds. So it was quite fun to, so there's the decoy.
It's a wonderful graphic, and I think there's another one that shows you pulling it through the grass, which is hilarious. I wish I had a video.
Oh, yeah, we would exercise the babies by pulling the decoy and they would follow you.
There we go.
Yeah. But they would follow something.
While we're here, that slide on the left, I first looked at it and I thought you were riding on a swan.
Oh,
but you're trying to retrieve one that's injured.
Yeah, I'm going like crazy, and right after that, the guy in the little poke boat that he had, he could really move that thing. He was like a little bumblebee out on the lake with his big camera, and I kept waiting for him to go over and destroy his camera, but he never did. He finally turned the swan back, and Moss leapt out of the boat and grabbed the swan by the wing, which allowed me to be able to come in and grab the swan. And then Moss swam it to the boat, and I picked it up. But there's a whole series of pictures with this in another presentation. We had 11 live birds and I don't know, 20 dead something. And we had to euthanize all the birds because they were just so sick from lead. And it still is one of my darker times, because lead is it just kills, and it kills, and it kills, and it kills. And it's frustrating.
Well, let me drag you to another wonderful topic with one of these questions. In what ways does climate change and weather irregularities influence the population decline in the swans?
I don't know that the population has declined overall. The birds just aren't here. That would be a better way to put it. We think that a
Mhm.
lot of them, because of the weather this fall, they hung up in BC or someplace in Canada. And that they just didn't come down. Even when we had the freeze, we didn't see what we usually see in January, which can be a pulse migration where waterfowl come down from Canada and spend a little time in the northern tier states, and then they go back. But that didn't happen this year. So we're not sure. I mean, we suddenly didn't lose 5,000 swans or more out of the population. Well, it's possible we did, but I don't think we did. I think they're hung up in Canada. That's what we're thinking. We do know that in the Alaska breeding areas and probably across Canada, the permafrost is not holding. And so trumpeter swans are now able to breed farther north by 40 or 50 miles. Because the permafrost underneath the lakes that they were using in some of the areas, the water disappears halfway through the summer or late in the summer. And they can't bring off a brood because they have no water, because it goes into the soil and is lost. So they're able now to get into these nesting areas they never had before because they have as many ice-free days, but they still have permafrost. And the loss of permafrost in Alaska is huge. And the other thing happening in Alaska, which is also contributing to the loss of permafrost, is beavers. Beavers are being found now in areas of Alaska that they've never been found in because it was too cold for beavers to survive. And now the beavers are there. And when you have open water, you have additional solar radiation and additional loss of the permafrost. So who knows where it's all going to go? It's just seeing the change in animal composition that has people worried.
So, right. Well, to another wonderful topic. First of all, Martha, would you clarify for us, what is the situation with using lead in any kind of shot, any kind of shooting? Is it not banned in all situations, or is it just for waterfowl?
Great question. So in the United States, so let me just say that in Europe, they are far ahead of us. When I was at the International Swan Symposium a year and a half ago, Europe had just decided to ban lead, the use of lead fishing and for hunting and shooting in any wetland situation under any circumstance. That's huge. Lead is only banned for waterfowl hunting in North America. It is banned in some states for some upland bird or complete upland bird, depending on the state, but not many. So it's still used for a lot of upland bird hunting. And it's still used for target shooting, which is not regulated by your departments of fish and wildlife or parks or whatever, because it's not a hunting activity. So even here, you can ban lead in the Skagit, and then on the same property, you can shoot targets with lead shot to your heart's content. And have I seen this on multiple sites in the Skagit alone? Yes. And then the swans and geese come in on that same property. So banning lead ammunition is a very challenging thing because in this country, lead ammunition and freedom are tied inextricably in the minds of some people. Just look at the NRA.
Well put.
You just have to look at that. There are other organizations. Sporting Lead Free is one of them. And there are hunter organizations. California did, in fact, ban all of this. And they have made some really great progress. But they're only one state. I know it's a big state and it's really, it's really good. But we need to do more, and it's a slow process. And even our state agencies are not willing to buck some of the seriously challenging situations that come up when people become intensely emotional about their lead ammunition and lead fishing gear for that matter. I met a guy the
Oh,
other day at
yes.
Crescent Lake and he said, well, I still have some old split shot and I'm trying to use it up. And I just was very polite and I said, well, the swans are roosting here and I'd really appreciate it. The swans will appreciate it if you stop using it here. And he said that he would give that serious consideration. Again, these hunting and fishing people really don't want to give it up. They claim it's too expensive or whatever. So one of the things that happened a few years back is that a company came out with a bunch of fishing poles for kids. And they came with the pole and the little fishing reel and some lures. And they were recalled for being contaminated with lead. And your first thought is, well, of course they put in a lead lure, right? No, the contamination they were recalled for was because the decal sticker of Spider-Man or Wonder Woman contained lead. Now, the fishing lure contained a lot of lead. That didn't trigger it. It was the label on the thing that they were worried that the child might put in his mouth. The fact that he's probably going to put the lead sinker in his mouth never occurred to them. So we have a disconnect in some of our world. So
yes, we better stop talking on that. We're going to get ourselves in trouble. Dave Kraft, our president, as you got to meet earlier, lives in Kettle Falls, so he's up there in the Ponderay County area.
yes,
He
you
wants to know
live
about
in
tracking.
Trumpeter country.
That's what he wanted to know about. Are there plans using your banding satellite tracker? I mean, I know you don't have that many of them to figure out where those trumpeters are going.
We would love to do that. Unfortunately, there isn't any money and there isn't a student and there isn't a whole lot of things. However, that said, I don't know if they're having a Tundra Swan Festival again this year, and it's probably the same weekend as the Othello Crane Festival. And I'm going back to Othello because they want me to speak again. And I still have to do some more work around learning more about what's happening in that central area of Washington and to the south, where we're getting a lot of Tundra Swans coming through and a lot of trumpeters are coming through too. I mean, nothing like the Tundra Swans are, but when you get 100 trumpeters in a place, you're like, that's a lot. So the answer is yes, they're over there. They're coming through the Kalispell Lake area. They're coming through with the Tundra Swans. And it's fabulous to be there when you see these Tundra Swan migrations happening. We watched a whole probably 8,000 Tundra Swans on Kalispell Lake one evening. They all started, there was probably about 5,000 on the lake, and they all started going in the same direction. And we were just sitting there like, oh, they're going to take off and they're going to go tonight. This is it. And they all started getting in the same direction. And then a group of several hundred Tundra Swans came flying over the lake, and everybody just took off. And within 5 minutes, there wasn't a swan on that lake. It was just incredible. And the day before I had counted over 200 trumpeters in the tundra flock. Now, there were no trumpeters there either, but I don't know what their migration is. I mean, there's just so much we don't know. And where do you find 200 trumpeter swans to the south of that to be able to come through? We don't know that either. Nobody's looking. We just don't know. We can guess. They're all going to Alberta. We're pretty sure of that. But where do they winter? We just don't know. Somewhere where we're not looking. That's all I can say.
Right. We're going to switch birds, I guess not gears, switch to snow geese for a quick couple questions. These two are similar. One of our great colleagues has said, why in the fall in Edmonds do I see and hear so many snow geese flying from the south to the north, going north in the fall? along the coast?
They're just moving around.
understandable?
They haven't yet. I mean, I get it. I hear
Mhm.
that too. They're moving around. They don't just bomb through here. I think that we're seeing, you know, they're going north. They might, if they're all Wrangel Island birds more than likely, because we don't really get the migration going to California. So they may go down and be in the Sauvie Island area, and then they come back up through and may, you know, so there's an interchange that we still don't really fully understand.
Thank you, Jan. I think that addresses your question somewhat as well. I popped one here. Are there techniques effective for control of snow goose numbers in their nesting areas in the tundra, where so much damage has taken place by snow geese?
Well, in the mid-continent population, they're trying to do things, you know, with the extended hunt. There's 1 million too many snow geese over in that population. In our
Oh.
population, let me just say, the Russians think that there should be 2 times as many snow geese as there currently are. We do not have the carrying capacity for that on the wintering grounds. It doesn't exist without substantial economic damage to a lot of farmers in California and in Washington and into BC and on our bays. I mean, BC is just screaming. So the complexity of this population that we have, the Wrangel Island population, is very challenging for the managers. And then when you add in the Western Arctic population, it gets even more challenging. So let me just say, yeah, we aren't going to have that many snow geese if we can help it. But the damage would be substantial if we ended up having many more snow geese than we do.
Excellent. Well, a tiny present for you. One of our viewers here on this meeting has mentioned that he took a photograph in December of a kink-necked swan. He's going to send it to you.
Oh, I would love to see it. I'm hoping it's when we were doing some banding,
I'm sure.
a bent-necked swan flew over us and was circling and circling, and we were like, "Woohoo! This is really cool." And it wasn't the one that we think is older now. We saw at the north part of the valley, but yeah, I would love to see that. It would be great.
Well, I think we have exhausted well, we haven't exhausted your knowledge, but exhausted our ability to pick out sensible questions.
So let me just put in, and
Yeah.
I'm going to put out a request for anyone who may want to participate. The graduate student up in the Skagit, Yvonne, she has been trying to get to do some swan surveys, and so we're trying to pull those together. And we still need more volunteers for later in February and March. So if you would like to do a swan survey on a Saturday or a Sunday, it's going to be, please reach out to me. These are simple surveys. Let me say this. You can go have fun on them and you can do what you want, but all we need is it a swan or not? And all you have to do is, I call it drive-by swan counting, because you just drive up, count, oh, there's 10 swans there, 11 swans there. You mark it on a map, you put it on your data sheet, next. We don't care if they're trumpeter or tundra or juveniles, adults. We just care if there's swans there. This may change over the course of to next year, but right now we just need to know where the swans are in distribution, and it doesn't matter what species they are. So we did the midwinter count, which is of course species and age ratios. But now we just care if it's a swan or not. So if you know anybody that might want to help out, it takes about 2 to 3 hours to do an area up there. Please let me know, because I could sure use some more. Going into the next count will be the 17th or the 18th of February, and then it'll probably be the first weekend in March. So
I
that's,
hope you don't mind. I've just entered both your email and your phone number, your cell phone number.
that's fine. Everybody knows where I'm at.
I know that's how you like it to go.
Yeah, and that's fine. It's been, I got 6 people for tomorrow. It's great to do that. I supply all the maps, I do everything. But we need more people so that it isn't an onerous thing to do 2 areas, because the Skagit Valley is a big place. So I'm trying to keep it fun for the volunteers. So we don't give you too big of an area. And some people can request what they want. And if you have a special place you want to go survey, well, that's great. But we have routes, and they're just big areas, and you drive the whole area. Or we can divide areas if we get enough people. So it's a fun thing to do, and you never know what you're going to find. You just never know. Look at the legs of your swans out there, folks, and tell me what you find. I will.
Well, having you, Martha, has been a true joy and privilege, and we really appreciate your coming digitally and having the opportunity for this great talk on the white birds in Washington in winter.